All right, guys. So the other thing we're doing here is we're using a drop-down list. And of course, as you can see, the drop-down list allows you to use a lot less space on the web form initially, but when you actually interact with it, then it shows you all the available options. In this particular drop-down list, we have Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, right? Um, and it's probably useful for me to show you the actual composure of the drop-down list. Let me do this. How about I do this? I'm going to go ahead and look at the drop-down list on the design form, right? And so if we click on the drop-down list, and let's go ahead and edit it, edit items. Notice that we have Florida, the text is Florida, the value is also Florida. Text here is Georgia and the value is Georgia. Now we could, for example, have said that the value is GA, so we could be using the 2-digit code, whereas the text is the spelled out name, right? This arrangement helps us to, or allows us to have, two different representations of each state, right? In this particular case, they're the same, but you could have a situation where the value is different from the text. Yeah. All right. Let's jump back to our code, or let's jump back to our program. And so notice what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select Georgia. I'm going to change the selected value. Yeah. Click on Georgia. And what happens here is that I actually get this little message box. You selected Georgia. Easy enough. I click on South Carolina, and again, I get a little, I get a little message box saying you selected South Carolina, right? And so this is essentially how the first drop-down list should work, all right? Let's click OK. And of course, if I select Florida, then it gives me again another, it gives me another message box saying you selected Florida. All right, let's jump back into the code. Let's kind of see how the code works. And, as usual, if we double click on our drop down list, if we double click on any control, then it shows us the event handler that runs on behalf of that code, right? So let's go ahead here and do a view code, and notice here that we have essentially another event handler. Notice that this event handler handles the event selected index changed, right? Selected index changed. I did say selected value, but it's the selected index changed. And the index is really just, the first item in the drop-down list has an index of 1, the second item has an index of 2, etc. When you select a different item in the drop-down list, then that represents a selected index change because you've changed the index of the item which is selected, right, by clicking on another icon. All right, let's look at the functional code within the event handler. And what we're seeing here is that first thing we need to do, again, is to assign the value of the selected value to a variable. And in this particular case, we're using the variable called state, right? Notice it's a string, and we're saying that state is going to become the same value as the one that is now selected in the drop-down list. Here we see our if statement. What we're saying here is, if the state is equal to Georgia, then we're going to execute this this command, this line of code rather. If the state was not Georgia, but if it is instead Florida, then we execute this line of code. We say, you selected Florida. And if it was still not Georgia or Florida, but if instead it was South Carolina, then we get a message box saying you selected South Carolina. All right. Now we have a little backup here to sort of complete the format of the if statement, and it simply says, well, you didn't select any of the states that we expected, so apparently you selected an unlisted state, right? And you could use this to capture any other state apart from the 3. So you could have 10 states in the drop-down list box, but only name the particular state that was selected if it is one of these 3 states, right? Okay, good. Let's jump to the general structure of our if statement. Notice that it starts with if, it has a then, has an else if sometimes, and the else if has a matching then, and so on. Eventually we have an else, and we round out the discussion with an end if. So essentially how it works is this. Between the if and the then, there is a condition. And here's our condition in this particular case. We're saying if we have satisfied the condition that the state is Georgia, because we selected Georgia here, right? So if this variable has a value of Georgia, then we will execute this line of code. All right. Now, in the case where it was not Georgia, we say else, yeah, if the value of state was Florida, then we will execute this line of code, right? So in other words, we have a if condition, then action, right? If condition, then do something, right? And it's similar to saying, if the traffic light equals red, then stop. Else, if traffic light equals yellow, then proceed if it's not a stale yellow. Yeah. I mean, if the thing is about to change to red, maybe you want to just stop anyway. And if the traffic light is equal to green, then we can actually just go ahead and drive through the traffic light. Yeah. And so we have if conditions all around us in the world, and typically we do something if a certain condition is met. If it is 7 o'clock in the morning, then we rise to go to work. Yeah. If it is 10 o'clock at night, then we go to sleep. Yeah. We're surrounded by if then else if conditions all around us, right? Notice we end everything with the end if keyword, right? And so it's very important that all of these keywords, notice these keywords which are highlighted here, you should never use them as the names of variables and so on, right? Because otherwise the program actually gets confused. All right, so that's how the if statement works, and that is what we wanted to do in this particular homework. All right, thank you. So please make sure that this is a part of your November 16 classwork, right? It's also going to form a part of your assignment 3, and then it will also be on test 3, not as extra credit, but as part of just the base test 3. All right, thanks everybody.